get started with the show, I just wanted to mention that if you've been a subscriber to this channel, or you have just recently started watching on YouTube and coming from the podcast platform, you may have noticed there's very few episodes on the YouTube channel, and that this is episode 55, but there's only, I think, 7 now on the channel. And the reason why is because I decided, since those other episodes do not have video, to remove them, because YouTube is a video platform. And since those other ones are just the audio with an image, I didn't feel like, it felt just a little cluttered to me. So if you're a new subscriber to this channel, or you're new to the show and you like to listen to older episodes, those are available on any podcast platform. But moving forward, all the episodes will be here on YouTube as well as the podcast platforms. So today, the question that I am aiming to answer is if money is evil. And of course, the first thing that you've probably thought of, regardless if you know any verse in the Bible or not, is money is the root of all evil. And if you didn't know, that's actually a verse in the Bible. We get that from 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, they have erred from their faith and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So that's basically where we get the term money is the root of all evil, is from 1 Timothy 6:10. But then we have a scripture in the Old Testament that kind of scratches some heads on the Bible's view on if money is evil or not. And we get that in Ecclesiastes 10:19. And it says, "A feast is made for laughter, and wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things." So right off, this is actually a very easy one to debunk as far as if they contradict each other. Notice in 1 Timothy 6:10, it says, "For the love of money is the root of all evil." It does not say money is the root of all evil. It says the love of money. You know, that falls into like greed and selfishness. And if all your life and everything you do only is for money, and that's like the only meaning in your life is to get more money, that's the root of evil. And that's exactly what Paul was telling to Timothy here, is it's the love of money, not money. So society has taken the scripture and removed a very important word that kind of helps us understand what this means. A lot of us, it's been said a lot by many preachers, or especially in the past, that wealth is not a good thing, that wealth can be a bad thing. And this is not what this is saying at all. It's just, you can have wealth, you can have riches, and there's a right way to go about it. There's an okay, but if you're doing it with, that's all that's on your mind, that's where your heart is, and you know, it's not about service to the customer, because any job that you have it has to involve a client, it has to involve providing a service to people. And if your heart's not there, if your heart is just for the money and not for the service, then that's where the evil lies. The evil lies because you don't care for your customer. And that's really entrepreneurship 101. You got to care for the customer. You got to do the best for your customer. The company I work for, we talk about creating raving fans. And that means we do everything we can to make the customer experience wonderful for the customer, no matter what that takes. So this is really good advice from Paul for any entrepreneurs out there. Don't focus on the money. Now, there is going to be somewhat of some focus on trying to gain wealth. You know, that's why a lot of people go into entrepreneurship. But there's a balance, and you got to watch that balance. And if you start focusing too much one way, if you start focusing too much on the money end, you're going to become very greedy, very selfish, and you're not going to be serving the customer well. And your soul is going to be in the wrong place, ultimately. You're not going to be in a good place with God because of the greed and the selfishness. That does debunk this contradiction, because 1 Timothy is not about money, it's about the love for money. But I thought we should get into Ecclesiastes 10:19, even though we've already, again, debunked this, because it's a very interesting scripture, and it has perplexed many. As I have studied for this episode, I noticed in a lot of commentaries people have really sat down and really thought a lot about this scripture in 10:19. where at the end of the scripture it says, "But money answereth all things," because that definitely leaves the impression that to have anything in this world, to be somebody, to anything you want, it's all about money, and so therefore we should be focusing on getting money. So it leaves a lot of people perplexed, and I've read a lot of commentaries, and a lot of them pretty much fall in the same line. Some commentaries believe that Solomon is speaking in the words of a foolish king, that this is how a foolish king thinks, and this is what he would say: "A feast is made for laughter, a wine maketh merry, but money answereth all things." And I can see why they would think that, but if you really read the scriptures in whole, it seems like, it doesn't seem like to me and a lot of other commentaries out there that this is Solomon speaking as a foolish king, but he actually means these words. And to better understand verse 19 and to kind of realize that these are Solomon's words and these are Solomon's thoughts, you have to start in verse 15. And we'll just start there. "Fools are so exhausted by a little work that they can't even find their way home. What sorrow for the land ruled by a servant, the land whose leaders feast in the morning. Happy is the land whose king is a noble leader, and whose leaders feast at the proper time to gain strength for their work, not to get drunk. Laziness leads to a sagging roof. Idleness leads to a leaky house. A party gives laughter, wine gives happiness, and money gives everything." And that was in the New Living Translation. So first off, in verse 15, Solomon's talking about lazy workers. They get exhausted real quick, and that could be because they're not resting up. They're not eating at proper times, or what have you. They're up all night partying and getting drunk, and when they should be resting, or they're eating out of pleasure and not to gain strength. And they're so exhausted that they can't even find their way home, he says. And in verse 16, Solomon is saying they're ruled in a land like if a servant was ruling. And that servant really has no place to rule. They don't understand ruling. They're very selfish, and they're very greedy. And as we know, and we've seen stories where a servant makes their way and somehow finds their way into being the king, but they're focused on themselves. They are very greedy, and the kingdom is ruined for it. And that's what Solomon is saying here. That the kings of these lands, they're no better than if a servant was ruling, because they don't understand good rulership. They don't understand the needs of the people, and they don't understand how to be an honorable king. And he goes on, it continues on, and then in verse 17, "Happy is the land whose king is a noble leader, and whose leaders feast at the proper time to gain strength for their work, not to get drunk." So here is a noble king. He's been anointed to be king by God, and he leads in a proper way. And he leads so work gets done and that the land prospers. And then 18, "Laziness leads to a sagging roof. Idleness leads to leaky house." So here he compares to laziness is just basically like a ruined house. Laziness is not going to pay the bills. Laziness is not going to pay for the upkeep of the home. Laziness puts your home in ruin. And that's what he's saying here. And then we go to verse 19. "A party gives laughter, wine gives happiness, and money gives everything." So I've read some commentaries where we know early on in Ecclesiastes, Solomon does talk about that, the pursuit of wealth is a foolish endeavor. But here he says, "And money gives everything." Now, some have said, and I'm not saying this is wrong, this is very good commentary, that, he's referring to have, and, New Living Translation says party, other translations say feast. So, to have a feast, to be able to relax and wind down, and to be able to have wine, to, again, relax and wind down at the proper time, it costs money. You got to have money to pay for those things. And and as he mentioned in verse 17, we're having these feasts and we're having these wine to build strength for the next day, to work. So the commentaries say, of course, you need money to keep that up. But I think that it's kind of 19 is kind of referring back to a few other scriptures. I think verse 19, the first two parts of it, a party gives laughter, wine gives happiness, is referring back to verses 16 and 17, where he's talking about where people just eat and drink basically for the wrong reasons. They're eating just because they enjoy eating, and they may overeat because that's what they enjoy the food they have, and they're not eating at a good balanced diet, and basically they're eating so much that their bodies are kind of breaking down in a sense. And same thing, they're drinking so much they get drunk. And then I know, like, you think verse 19, it seems like that's exactly what he's suggesting, that a feast brings laughter and a wine gives happiness. But if also earlier on in Ecclesiastes, he talks a lot about when in sorrow, a good way to get out of sorrow is a good meal and good times with your friends and family. Just to sit around the table and be with people and have a good meal in front of you and talk with them and laugh with them and what have you. And he talks about how important that is. And he definitely sees a difference between having a feast and partaking in wine to wind down and to enjoy each other's company, and then other than just doing it because to get drunk, or you're just eating because you like to eat, or a gluttony, basically. So he's saying to eat and to drink to gain strength, but part of gaining strength is being in a good mental place. And being able to work and be happy working is to also be in a good mental place. And how do we get into a good mental place? He basically already said it earlier on in Ecclesiastes, having a good meal with friends and family. Sitting, again, being around the dinner table and enjoying your time with your family and friends and sharing a meal. And, no one's getting drunk. No one's eating more than they should. You're not eating in a gluttonous way. And you're not drinking to get drunk. You're just there to enjoy, to wind down from a hard day's work, and to rest and to build up strength for the next day. And he's saying in verse 16 and 17, that's not what foolish kings are doing. They're overfilling when they eat, and they're getting too drunk. And when it's time to get up in the morning and work, the energy's gone because the food their metabolism is just working too hard to break down that food, and their energy is gone. And they were just too drunk from the night before that we all, they have a hangover now. It's hard to get going. Eating food and drinking in itself is a way to gain strength, but also to have a good time and to wind down with friends and family. And then the last part, and money gives everything. So this refers back to definitely verse 18. Laziness leads to a sagging roof. Idleness leads to a leaky house. I definitely think this is what he's talking about in that last part in verse 19. I definitely think that last part in verse 19 is referring to verse 18. You have a leaky roof. So what do? Unless you're a roofer yourself, you call somebody and you pay them to do it. But how do you get the money to be able to pay that roofer to get your house fixed? Because he's not going to fix it for free. You go to your own job and you work hard and you make the money and to help keep the upkeep of your home. And that's what he's saying. I definitely agree with the commentaries who say, you need money to have food and wine. Definitely makes sense. What I'm saying is not contradicting that. But just to be able to live and have a reasonably decent life, if you will, you have to have money to keep things going. If you want to provide for your needs and you want to provide for your wants, you have to go to work and make money. And you can't be lazy about it. You can't. And this is why he's saying, you got to be careful about eating too much and getting too full and getting too drunk, because then you're not going to have the strength to go and work and make that money. And without that money, then, you can't provide for yourself. You can't provide for your family. And when your home is in ruins and it needs fixed, you don't have the money to fix it. And now it's going to come to a point that you ate and drank all your money away, and now you got nothing to eat and drink on. So now you're going to be malnourished, and you're definitely not going to have the energy to work. And he's just saying there's a good balance of it all. He's not saying that, go out there and find money and get money, and that should be your only focus. He's just letting you know, if you want to make it in this life, money is a necessity. Money is something you're going to need, and there's only one way to get that money, and that is to work for it, and you need to do so. Money is not evil. It's the love of money that is evil. Pursuing wealth, and that's all that you're thinking about and that consumes you, is just wealth and money and riches. That's the root of evil. That's the root of greed and whatnot. But you need to have a good balance for providing and serving for your community, but then also having the drive to have the money to be able to provide for yourself is good. And that's exactly what we can get from Ecclesiastes 10:19 and 1 Timothy 6:10 is that balance. The balance of serving, and then the balance of the drive to provide for yourself and your family. So that's the episode for this week. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you haven't subscribed to this channel or to this podcast yet, please do so. If you're watching on YouTube, give a thumbs up or give a thumbs down to how you feel about this episode, and leave a comment how you feel about this episode. If you're listening from a podcast, please consider giving this show a rating on whatever platform you're listening from, and leaving a comment how you feel about the show overall. And then also find this podcast at Reliable Bible on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Visit our website again, reliablebible.com. All of our episodes are available there, the video and the audio, and also a contact form for you to fill out and reach out to the show. Any show suggestions, any comments, any corrections. I would love to hear from anyone who's listening to the show and how you feel about it. Love to know your thoughts on it. And also, again, if you're watching on YouTube and you'd like to go back and listen to some older episodes, you can find all of our archived episodes on any podcasting platform. Wherever you stream podcasts, they'll be there. And lastly, I'd like to thank everybody who has helped support this channel. And if you'd like to join them, patreon.com/Reliable Bible. Next week, Matt Browning will be here. Some of you might remember Matt. He used to host this show weekly with me, and things got a little busy for him. And so it's become me, just the host, but he's going to be here guest hosting with me next week. And we have a great episode. We got a great episode next week. Him and I really enjoyed recording it and really enjoyed taking the time together to discuss it. And it's going to be a great episode. I know you all enjoy it, so be looking forward to that show next week. So again, Matt Browning will be here next week. So again, thank you everyone for listening, and God bless, and see you next week.